David, a couple of things that you've said that I just want to highlight. And one, that housing, which is a lifeline for all of us, is a human right. The other thing that you have made so clear is that by the time we are talking about people with out housing, without stable housing, by the time we are talking about people in shelters, people on the streets, we are talking about a complex chain of events and lack of appropriate services for human beings that have come together. It's a complex reality, if you will, of injustices that have come together, that the end point in some respects is homelessness. And so there have been failures in the system way before we get to the point of people being without the human right of a place to live. The other thing that you've made so clear is that as it is a human right, we are talking about human beings. We are talking about sacred human beings, and that everybody that has breath is sacred. And that brings me to faith communities. It seems to me that there should be no community more concerned about the way in which people are treated and regarded as if they're expendable. And now we're in a situation where it become very easy for these most vulnerable communities, the least of these, as we like to say, to now become disposable with the blink of the eye. And so this is an indictment on our society, but it is also an indictment in particular on faith communities. This has happened on our watch. And so, David, I know I've worked with you for a couple of years now, and you have over and over again expressed to me and others your disappointment and the lack of consistency when it comes to the engagement of faith leaders and the faith community in dealing with this issue when it comes to these sacred human beings that we have neglected, disregarded. Could you speak to not only your disappointment, but the ways in which you would like to see faith communities and that faith communities ought to step up to the plate now and beyond?
Sure, sure. Thank you, Kelly. Um, I'd like to say first that there are individual houses of worship, individuals and congregations that work very, very hard every day trying to bring relief, to trying to provide food and shelter to homeless individuals. And we applaud that. We work closely with them. And I don't want to not acknowledge that they have a huge impact in providing relief to those in need. But when you look at the scale of the homelessness crisis in New York City and elsewhere, it just boggles the mind that this has become normalized to the extent that it has, that this has become a profile of our city that we accept as a place that we can live. Things have gotten to a tipping point in certain cities. Finally, in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, things have gotten so bad that they seem to have some political will to take more dramatic steps to do something about it. New York City is a little bit different because the Coalition for the Homeless and the Legal Aid Society had brought a series of lawsuits that created a legal right to shelter. So you don't see the big tent cities in New York City that you do in places like LA and Miami and San Francisco. So the profile is a little different, but the underlying failure is the same, that we have allowed it to become acceptable for huge portions of our population to suffer, to sleep on the streets. We found ways of walking by that and turning our eyes, of identifying those people as another, as the homeless population, and allowing it to be something that doesn't concern us and offend us every day. My fear had always been that kids are going to grow up and think that this is the way cities should be run. Yeah. They'll think that people sleeping on the street is a normal thing. And I have to say, once I had kids, my kids are 4 and 7, it really heartens me to see that the natural reaction of a child is to know that this is wrong. My kids see that, and their first reaction is, why are we walking by them? Why aren't we bringing that person in to sleep on our couch, giving them our spare space that we have in our room? So I know it is within the human heart to not accept this as the way things should be. The faith communities are supposed to be leaders in how that gets implemented on a larger societal basis. So while we have a considerable amount of engagement and help from members of congregations and houses of worship providing soup kitchens and private shelters, that's not going to solve the problem. That is necessary but not sufficient. We need larger systemic change here. We need a change in how we view what is acceptable in our society. And it is supposed to be our religious leaders, the members of our faith community that are out there and convincing our elected leaders that this is not right. Where is the moral argument for ending homelessness in our city, in our state, and in our country? Where is the theological argument for doing that? We know that those are there. That is the basis. Taking care of our fellow human beings is supposed to be the basis of any house of worship. And we are purportedly a very religious country. Where is the schism then? Where is the shortfall? Where is that gap? Where are the voices of the highest up leaders of our faith community putting pressure on our elected leaders? Because it's not that we can't solve homelessness. We know how to solve homelessness. There are solutions that have been tried and tried again over the last 4 decades. It is for sure a complex problem, and there's a lot of things, a lot of structural inequities that led to things being the way they are. But we know that permanent housing is the solution to homelessness. We know that by building more supportive housing, we could get the majority of people off the streets. We know that by giving rent subsidies, we could get people out of the shelters and put them into permanent housing. We know the solutions, but the political will isn't there. So what we need from the faith community, we need activism, we need advocacy, we need your voice heard, we need pressure on our elected officials to use the resources that we do have. We're a very wealthy city, a wealthy state, a wealthy country. We do have what we need to solve the problem. We're just not doing it.